Hello and welcome to episode 7 of Full Swing Thoughts, a fried egg podcast on the Netflix docuseries Full Swing. I'm Brendan Porath, joined by Andy Johnson and Joseph LaMagna. Boys, we will jump right into it. Episode 7 has an appropriately vanilla, banal title, I think, for what followed. It's Golf is Hard. And that's kind of like the punt tweet you see the PGA Tour share when they want to like not show up a guy, but also share a guy that like, chunked a chip or left a shot in a bunker. Like that's what they use as like, we're not being mean, but we're also showing you this guy uh, play a crappy shot that we know will be popular on social media. Anyways, the title is Golf is Hard, felt appropriate. It takes place at the Players Championship. That first timers media day broad press conferences, Andy. I know you and I have attended that one where everybody gets their cufflinks. One of the most critical scenes of the year in professional golf, that first timers media day outside the big
I like
clubhouse.
the first
I
timers
know you
media
do.
day. Don't
I'm not hating on
I
it. I'm not
love
hating on it. It's
I
just
love being able to walk around and like actually meet. It actually makes me want to go to the Players this year. Is like strictly for that
it's good.
press conference because like you get like one-on-one
Yep.
time with a dozen, PGA Tour players.
So it takes place at the Players. Takes place at the Phoenix Open, largely for Sahith Theegala. It takes place at Riviera, which explores a little bit of Mito Pereira and, his relationship with Joaquin Niemann, and the PGA Championship, which is a primarily Mito Pereira focused section. So Mito and Sahith Theegala are the two primary characters in a rookies storyline, which I guess is a phenomenon that exists, but we'll talk about that more. First, let's get into what you guys liked about this episode. Were there aspects, even as small, because I feel like, we ended on 6 a little down about where we were in the series. And I don't want to just continue that. Were there things you gleaned that you enjoyed, or stories that were told that you thought were good?
Yeah, I think just in general the rookie aspect of the PGA Tour is a really important storyline to cover in this. I think that covering the rookies and, you know, I think they did some good things illuminating how difficult it is for rookies. I thought Sean Foley was excellent describing like, hey, these guys are playing these courses for the first time. They're having to learn. They did it well with Mito Pereira talking about, hey, we need to manage your load with the performance coach. You're working out, you need to play all this golf to learn the courses. We got to keep your energy levels high. I think that they did some good things in showcasing, it's hard for the PGA for the rookies to keep the card. They also fell short in some other aspects of that with, you know, just explaining a few things like, a guy like Sahith Theegala doesn't really get to pick where he gets to play. That's one of the tough things with rookies. They don't get to set their schedule. And they had, innuendos. They showed him sitting at home,
Yeah.
right? Explaining he doesn't get into the PGA, right? They did good stuff with that. I think I really did enjoy the background information on Sahith Theegala. And I think, that was the high point of the show for me, was really the Theegala aspect of it. I think I was mainly confused as I rewatched it about and thinking about the show in totality about why was this episode 7? And B, what happened the rest of the year with Sahith? Like they
With
show, it's
Travelers, with
Sahith.
Travelers, where it was obviously a critical moment for him, right?
Yeah, Travelers, the Open. He was in the mix at a
Yeah.
major. Like he's playing his first, like, really in the mix at a major championship, and arguably one of the most interesting, fascinating storylines from that major was this rookie who was staying in a dorm. You know,
As written up at the
and
Friday.
I loved like showing him adjusting to home life, with the laundry, the box as a laundry basket, talking about how he was particular about laundry, but now he does it himself and he's not particular. I thought that was like really enlightening, and for a casual fan they could have gone a little bit deeper into that. Is like, I think one of the most difficult things for a rookie is that idea of like living life on your own on top of being at this competitive disadvantage comparatively to the rest of the tour. They showed Mito Pereira with like a chef, a performance coach. They didn't show Sahith with any of that, and they could have expanded on that stuff. But overall, I love that this episode was a part of the plan. I just don't know if the execution of it was great.
Okay. Joseph, what were some things you liked about this particular episode or learned?
By far, my favorite thing was seeing Sahith's family, and I got a lot out of his dad in particular. Um, the way that when Sahith on
Yes.
17 at
Yes.
Scottsdale, when he hits the ball in the water, and his dad's like, "Is it safe?
Safe.
Is it safe? Like, tell me, guys, is it safe?" And then it's in the water. The way Sahith reacts in his press conference when he's crying, and when he comes out, the embrace that he gets from his family, and his dad being like, "You'll get your day soon." Like, I thought it was incredibly endearing, added a lot of character to Sahith. I loved the anecdote that Sahith said his dad told him, "Don't temper your
Yep.
emotions. Like, let your emotions be a part of who you are." And Sahith saying, like, "I'm just trying to be more like my dad." Like, I thought I got a lot out of that. That was by far the high point for me. I think I could have used some more background. Like, Sahith's dad, they got to the United States in the late 80s and would have maybe appreciated a little more backstory and the lack of Indian representation on tour. Like, maybe we could have done a little more there, but overall, I really liked that element of this
The
episode.
emotions thing, this is just an aside. I thought it was just a quick observation. When he was coming out of his press conference where he was crying, was Brooks standing there in the doorway waiting to go on next, right? And like sort of the antithesis. I know he's cried at that very at that very event at the Phoenix Open, but kind of the guy who, to that point, really bottles it up, puts on a face, maybe puts on the badass face. It was just an interesting contrast as you see Sahith walking out after just crying in front of him, and there's Brooks kind of standing in the doorway trying to be on his phone and I don't know, ignore whatever's going on.
To that point, we talked about earlier in this series how we thought the Brooks episode should have been the first episode out of the gate. And I think that connection that you just alluded to that I didn't pick up on would have been
Me
much
neither.
more evident to people if this episode was like episode 2, which I think it would have fit really well with, and then you could have gone JT Jordan after and I think we'll get into that with
Yeah.
the Mito
Yeah.
thing. But like the Brooks, it would have tied really well together because it would have been Phoenix Open on top of Phoenix Open with if it followed right after Brooks, and then that press conference in the same room where Brooks was like icy, like I just got to play better. I got to do this, and the juxtaposition of him with Sahith crying, like it would have worked a lot better. I didn't pick up on that after watching it twice. I think that's like something that super interesting aspect that you just hit on, and I think this is where like episode 7 for this story felt really late.
Yeah, you make right. Why did I have a couple more good things, but let's just hit on that now. Why it felt odd. Why are we talking about the rookies? And then of course the next one is sort of the denouement at the Open and the Tour Championship. Why did they put the rookies here? Do you think like where would you have put it? Like 1, 2, and expect at 2?
Episode
I'm sorry,
2.
not 1, 2. Yeah, yeah. Okay,
I think the ideal flow would have been Brooks and
Chef.
Scheffler and these guys because
It's a lot of Phoenix.
the we'll get into the Mito thing. There's a lot of Phoenix in this, but the Mito story would have worked. The JT story coming right after the Mito story would have worked really really well.
Yeah,
And the Mito story at the PGA was completely independent of JT. They didn't even have to show who won that tournament.
they did
Exactly.
it for a second there, and he hoists the trophy and
They
all
did
that.
it because they tied it
Callback.
back because this was all out of
Yeah,
order. This was just it was a however it came to be that this became the order, this was extraordinarily poorly constructed with this episode here because it ruins the whole flow of the entire series. You feel like if you want a series to really work, they should build on each other. At this point, I felt like we took like 4 steps back in the story of the PGA Tour season for this episode. I felt like we were progressing, and this one takes us back, and I don't think it's the episode's fault. I think the episode would have been a lot better early in the series.
Right, right. I think a couple other things just to clean up that I liked. That's a good point. I mean, that's an overarching point. I'm glad we hit on at the top here. I enjoyed the background, the VHS, the home videos of seeing who he was as a junior golfer. And we talked about Finau, like wanting a little bit more of that story. I could have used more of it here, and just saying, like, look, come from a Hindi background, like sports aren't even a thing, let alone golf. Like, and they show him shooting hoops like in his living room. I love that of him playing golf really as a public golfer. And we heard Andy, what was it at the Open? We heard like he was good on hard pin because he was used to playing on pretty uh unwatered,
Chi Ch
hard
Muni
pan,
Chico
yeah,
Golf.
hard pan California golf. So I enjoyed that. I thought that was great, and it kind of filled a little bit of the void we had about Finau wanting a little bit more of his background. Just home videos are great. I know. I enjoyed. I thought they did a good job with the Mito 72nd hole collapse. It was drawn out. I think it was a little long. But I liked, Joaquin. They were on Joaquin, right? Of course, we get a lot of context for that relationship before that 72nd hole collapse. It's one of the major moments of the season and one of the great last hole collapses. I thought that was pretty well done just by like Neiman talking about, hey, this chip shot, it's not bad, right? And doing it with his hands, like he can do that. Like the lie was not great, but getting that context, getting the wife, confused about is this for par or bogey, and them having to correct her. Um, Mito, like, sorry to make you all wait around, like he says to, I think, Abraham Answer. And they're like, no, no, come on. We love you. Like, we were so happy to be here. It was drawn out. I thought it was a little long, but if you're going to be covering Mito, and I think they made that commitment before the PGA, you got to have a good chunk on that 72nd hole.
I think it also works really well for the rookie story. It's really hard to be a rookie, and I guess this is where the golf is hard, name comes, but it's very hard to be a rookie. It's very hard to win on tour. It's very hard, like experience does matter in majors, and I think that aspect of it works really well. I also really liked getting insight into the family that is like Latin
Totally.
golfers on the PGA Tour, Central and South American players. And I think, like, if anything, they could have provided a little bit more context. But seeing Carlos Ortiz, Bassi Munoz,
Answer.
Neiman, Answer all together, that makes sense. And given where this episode was in the series, it would have made a lot of sense to tie in some live stuff because a lot
And
of these players went to live at this time in the season. If you had followed the arc of the last episode, episode 6, and where we are chronologically in the greater series before going back, I get why it wasn't in this episode. This episode was about things that happened before live, but you know, half the players that were in this South America, Central American
I
family
agree.
went to live.
I would have loved to hear more about their thought process, their negotiations, the weight. Obviously, the Mito thing that extended all throughout the year. Neiman, it extended through the tour championship, but they were clear. Abe, it was the middle of the year. They were clearly all in deep negotiations, and maybe that was off limits for their agreement. I don't know, Joseph. Any other things? What did you make of like the sort of the Latin? Like how they bond together and off course footage there. Did you think there was enough? Did you like what they had?
yeah, and you're prefacing what Andy with your thoughts on live, some of the stuff that I want to get into, but while we're being positive,
We can
one other
switch.
thing I thought on Mito that was excellent was him saying hole 18 is really hard the day before on his drive home, and then that's the hole that he chokes on the next day. That was excellent to include in there. On the Latin American thing, thought that was
Well,
very
did
effective.
on the
Go ahead.
18th hole thing, they also had Sahith
Yep.
in watching golf
So
talking
hard.
about how hard it
Yeah.
was, and they also had the wife. I agree that was awesome. Like that
Awesome.
And I thought it was great they
Yeah.
got him ripping his glove walking off because, like, Mito, we didn't see anything around that in the PGA that showed any kind of anger, sadness. I mean, he was down, but we didn't see anything like that. So that was cool.
But yeah, to go to your original question on the Latin American thing, I think that was very effective. One of my takeaways is that it's Live signing a lot of these Spanish speaking players away is a really big like that's really tough for the PGA Tour. I've been to like the San Antonio event, and you see the crowd that's following Abraham Answer. The fact that we don't really have any Spanish speaking players left on tour is it's missing, and it was cool to have people speaking Spanish in the documentary. Like golf's a global game and we need more of that. So that was a big takeaway for me, like the importance of some of that culture on tour to these guys and them being close knit. And now that's not there anymore.
We're on a little bit of run of uh, showing the diversity of the tour, going Finau, Morikawa, Mito, and Sahith, right? I mean, that is like, I don't know if that was purposeful in this order. Andy, I think is accurately saying this episode fell out of order, but I've always felt that was sort of underplayed by the tour. Like golf is a pretty country club white game, but like at the highest level, there's a fair amount of economic diversity. I know it's a smaller sample size, top 100 or whatever, but we're on a run of that, displaying the diversity on tour. Go ahead, Andy.
I thought the chili traditions that were shown too was really cool after the Neiman win and the
Piscola.
piscola, the cookout, like that was really neat. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. You saw the family aspect of Neiman winning. The other thing, I forgot how good that Neiman win was at Riv. How he just basically just blew everybody out. That was a super impressive win, and I think having Neiman a little bit like it felt like it was about the rookies, but also Neiman had a pretty big role. And I love the back and forth between Mito and Neiman. One of my favorite parts was like them talking about the mitochondria and Neiman not knowing what it was, and him being like, "Well, I didn't really go to school." you
I just
know? And if you know a little bit about the background of Neiman, like he was this sensation. He turned pro effectively at 18. And and like I really wonder how much class he ever went to in his life. And I love that aspect, and Mito being like, "Well, it seems like it's working out just fine for you."
It's like, I just
you
got to
know?
make the 7-footer. I don't need to know what mitochondria is. Like, that was a great close to that little segment. All right.
Yeah.
I think that does it for the positive. Anything else?
It was weird though that they didn't label that they were at New Orleans playing the team event. If they had a footage of that, I think that would have been additive to
Oh,
that
I thought it was the
relationship because that
players.
was
You're right.
no, I think
TPC.
that was it was TPC New Orleans. I'm almost positive because I was trying to you know what, of course it looks a lot like is the old Houston venue, golf club of Houston
Yeah.
that they used to have the Houston, and I was like I was looking at the course. I was like, God, what course is that? And then I was like, oh, that's New Orleans.
Interesting.
And they're playing the team event, and they did that. That would have been a nice little additive, is like, oh, they played this team. I'm actually kind of surprised that like we're at this point, and I assume that Rory, I'm not going to spoil this, but guess what? Rory didn't play TPC Louisiana. I'm surprised that that wasn't at all a part of this, especially with the Mito Joaquin angle.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So that does it for the positive. We'll come back a little bit with the negative. But first, something else we're big positive on. That's B Draddy and zero restriction. I my segues. I don't.
You got your Proctor
Oh, I
hoodie on.
do, with the little, fried egg St. Andrews logo, as we're gonna talk about the Open here, this afternoon. I love the Proctor. I wear it with a vest if it's a little chillier out. You can wear it with kind of if that shoulder season, 35, 40, 50 degrees, depending on how, averse you are to the cold. But I'm a big Proctor hoodie guy. It fits perfectly. It's got the half zip here. What do you got on, Andy? What do you got on
I
there?
got the Lawrence Lightweight,
Alright.
which is one of my favorite. It's a vest. It's reversible. That's one of my favorite things about it is that
2
like
colors.
it's got this gray, yeah, gray colors, but then it's got the gray inside out that you can reverse it to. And I think that gray, like what I've noticed, the gray works really well for like casual situations, non-golf situations. That's what I love about this vest is that like it gives me a little bit of versatility. It's not like your standard blue, like zero restriction makes that standard blue vest that is all the rage on Wall Street. but this one's a little bit different material, and I think it works. It's a nice one because of the versatility it gives you in the closet. Like it's not, it's not a cheap vest, but I guarantee if you get this vest, you're going to use it a
The
lot,
one
and you'll see that you use it in different social situations, as well as it's an awesome vest for the
So
golf
one thing I
course.
like about that is like I get jammed up, like I'm dressed already, and I have like a navy shirt on or navy pant, like it will look like I'm monotone or too monochromatic, and I just can
Uh
flip it
huh.
around. It's like easy, and then I go on my way. I still want to wear it, so I like that Lawrence lightweight. Love the Proctor. Like their whole thing is sort of adaptability, right? It can be kind of upscale events. It can be lounging around the house. So obviously we live kind of in Draddy stuff from sun up to sundown. You can use the promo code TFE25 at bdraddy.com or zerorestriction.com. They're all Summit golf brands under the same umbrella there. They've been friends of ours really since the beginning of the Fried Egg with Andy, and big supporters of this concept, Full Swing Thoughts. So if you're enjoying that, you can support them for supporting us and use TFE25, not an insignificant amount. I was testing it to make sure it was still active on some of these products. You're knocking off like $60. So you're knocking off a good amount of
Yeah,
change. So go to zero
I
restriction.
think
Go
I
ahead.
think I think for this vest that I'm wearing, I've had it now for 3+ years. It was like a $200 plus vest, but you save $40, and I think if you get 3+ years out of something, when you amortize that, it's a pretty good
All right.
deal.
So TFE25 at bdraddy.com and zerorestriction.com. Thanks to them for their support. All right, fellas, we've said what we've said is positive. Did this episode overall work for you? We've said a lot of nice things. Was it enough to make the rookies episode work for you, aside from the ordering that Andy's issue he's already raised? Joseph, you want to go?
I'm happy to go. There's something that I have to say, and that is that we are now 7 of 8 episodes in to this show. Andy kind of teed this up on the last episode. Like, what do you guys think of the live coverage? And at this point, I am actually extraordinarily disappointed at how little of a story live has been in this Netflix series. And the fact that if you followed golf in 2022, at every press conference, players were asked about live immediately. The Finau and Morikawa episode of the Netflix show didn't have a mention of live. These players each should have been asked, hey, like, biggest story in golf, what do you think about live? Wasn't in the episode. Mito Pereira has now signed with live. And we don't even have in the Netflix episode any mention, hey, Mito, what do you think about live? And that's a huge miss that I'm extremely disappointed in. I think the fact that the Netflix was given the rights this year to film on the PGA Tour, and we had a once in a lifetime story with Liv. How little it's been covered is like I feel kind of betrayed as a golf fan and what I was expecting out of this. And to use the Ian Poulter clip when they were creating the trailer, you picked a hell of a year to follow the PGA Tour. For us to have this absence of live, I think is a stain on the series that I'm actually like really disappointed in. So, I mean, Joaquin Neiman also signed with live. He's on live now. He's in this episode, never asked about
Do you
live. And I don't mean it in an accusatory way. They don't need to interrogate these guys. But the fact that that's missing from the show, we're 90% of the way through now. I cannot believe it. And it's really
do
disappointing
you
to me.
think that was off limits? Like they can't even go there. And it's curious to me. It's amusing to me how many agents are appearing in this show. Like the agents clearly have a little bit of their thumb on the scale with how this is made and produced and getting involved. And same with the tour, I would say, because and the major organizations. But like they clearly, I'm not saying it's produced by them or sanitized, but they have an
Well,
influence.
hold on. There's a PGA Tour employee listed as an executive producer.
Thank you for
So,
saying that.
like, this needs to be pointed out. Like, there is a high-ranking PGA Tour employee listed as an executive producer. So,
Well,
to say that they're directly involved, it says so in the
yep.
credits.
Yep. So if the agents or the guys say they won't talk about it, what do you
Put
do?
that in there.
What's that? You still ask them and they do the
I think
cheeky
that's where
face
you
and
can.
they make a no
That's where
comment and that says for
Yep.
itself.
it's where you have these other voices. You have Sean Foley, you have Dylan DeShare, you have Amanda Renner, you have Daniel Rappaport in this to provide context, to provide answers to questions that the players might not want to answer. You have other people, like I bet Mito Pereira's wife would have talked about it. Like this is the thing. Like we got gleaned amazing insight into DJ just 2 episodes ago from what Paulina said, and said about Liv. Some of the most valuable stuff from the show has not been from the players. It's been from their, I would have been super interested to hear Seth talk about it as somebody who probably didn't get an offer, who financially is probably the least well off of all the players that have been profiled so far. In terms of like money earned, he's using a box as a laundry basket. He comes from humble beginnings with his like parent, like they didn't grow up like super rich. I would have been interested to hear Seth's dad talk about it. I would have been interested in almost every single person that has been interviewed for this show talking about Liv in some capacity. That was the story of the year. It's going to be the story of the decade with golf, and we've heard nobody talk about it.
And I think part of why I'm so disappointed is when we heard that this show was happening, what was floating around was like, wow, and the PGA Tour is letting unfettered access. Like they're letting Netflix say whatever they want. And now that we're 7 of 8 episodes in, it's starting to feel like PGA Tour propaganda to me, which was not what I was sold on. Liv was the big story of 2022. I can't get over how little of this Netflix series Liv is, and it's incredibly disappointing. So I'm really glad you called out, Andy, that a PGA Tour employee is listed as an executive producer. That is extremely important to call.
I'm with you. I agree. It was everything, everywhere to everyone. That was the story of professional golf. You cannot tell the story of professional golf in 2022 without like honestly hammering it. At least getting everyone's like if it's behind the scenes, we want to hear that behind the scenes stuff. I guess my only explanation, and it's not justification, it's an explanation, would be like they signed up to do this show, not to do this show that came out, not the one about the battle for pro golf. And maybe that's a separate documentary when they started it. And I've read reviews like Brendan Quinn, The Athletic. Again, just an explanation, not a justification.
But you can't.
But
you can't use it as a promo then.
Oh, you're talking about the Poulter thing, or you picked a hell of a year. That whole
yeah, you can't.
Right.
Yeah,
right. It seems like reviewers like Brendan Quinn, others like we come to our own conclusions, but it seems like they're saying similar things. Like they took a gamble to not really make this the anchor of the show, the entire lens with which the show is produced and distributed this first season.
I mean, you just talk about creating and this is it's titled docuseries, right? And when I hear documentary, it to me kind of connotes like a time capsule. And from that standpoint, if you're creating a time capsule of the 2022 PGA Tour and the a lot of the big name players, missing this is just like this is a perfect episode to show it too, because you've like the majority of the characters in this episode that are introduced in this episode and ancillary characters, as well as one of the leading characters, are now Live players.
Well, this is a pervasive problem with documentary filmmaking right now. It's not like unique to this. Like The Last Dance, you heard all the uproar. Like that was Michael Jordan's entirely portrayed. That was his portrayal, sanitized and most friendly to Michael Jordan. And that's why he signed on to it, and that's why
spoken like a true.
No,
LeBron
I'm not
fan
even
right
trying
there.
to bring that up. But that's like an issue with a lot of these like 30 for 30s or whatever. Like LeBron's doing the same thing, like behind his own story. Like that's a continued.
Can't wait for the uninterrupted.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It's a pervasive issue right now with even the most like blue blood, highfalutin like production companies and networks. That it's an issue with documentary filmmaking, especially as it relates to sports. But I get like we're getting off topic here as it relates to just episode 7. But I'm glad we're talking about it. I'm glad we're pointing it out.
Not really though,
because you thought this was. The
I think we
spot.
need to put it bluntly. It is embarrassing that there's one of the players profiled as Mito Pereira, who is now on Live, and Live is not a part of the episode at all. He's not asked about it once. That's embarrassing.
Well,
that's not a part of the a
He
part of the
well, to
episode.
to be fair, he did not sign until this winter.
It's not clear that
So
he's totally signed yet either. It's not, like, officially announced, right? I don't think they've announced it, but he is. I mean, he's playing in Oman as we speak, and
I
he
think
needs to be asked
I
about it.
think where it all falls apart, like I can say, oh, Meter Pereira hasn't signed, didn't sign like in the production period. His best friend
The
signed
Neiman
during the
part, yeah.
season,
Right, right.
they spent 15 minutes talking about.
Well, going back now to the last episode, we thought Morikawa was so thin. Like, maybe that's what the story you tell about Morikawa. Like, just ask him about Liv.
Yeah.
What's Liv weighing on you this year? Like, that's a way to make his story more
Mor-
interesting because he didn't do anything on the
Morikawa
golf
was
course.
and Morikawa wasn't like
A lock.
he was
Yeah.
wishy-washy. He did not give like he was not you wouldn't have characterized him for much of the year as like one of the staunch PGA Tour loyalists like a Rory or like a JT.
Yep.
Morikawa was and Finau was in the same boat. Like nobody really knew where Finau stood either,
That should
And
be in there. Even no
Yeah.
commenting
Yeah.
it. That would be interesting. If you ask Colin Morikawa, hey man, what do you think of Liv? And he said, you know what? No comment. That would have been an excellent part of the
Did
episode.
you watch Live London? Have you talked to Dustin Johnson? There's like questions you can ask to get color without asking
Right.
them, like, where are you with your negotiations with them, right? To get some color about the scene of what everybody's thinking and talking about. Yeah, that's fair.
Even like the Fitz, and we didn't talk about this. I had a note of this, and I didn't bring it up in the Fitz episode. The question about to Fitz about and it worked. It's because it was a DJ Fitz episode about the offer from Liv and him talking about like it was kind of like a half-hearted offer. I don't think they really gave me a real proposal. I gleaned a lot of insight from that because I don't think Liv thought he was a great
Going
player.
to have the year he had. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I bet they sent that offer over to him early in the year, and it's like that's the example of the guy that like probably got offered less than Westwood or Poulter or something, and ended up being now like a centerpiece of the PGA Tour stable, right? Like I gleaned a ton from that question, and that's what's been. It's as simple as that. Like we talk about through lines in all of these episodes. Tiger has been a through line in every single episode. All right. I think that's a great through line. That's something they've done really well is like they have subtly, without devoting a ton of airtime, explained Tiger Woods' importance to the sport for the casual fan. Where they have utterly fallen flat on their face in this entire season arc is telling the story of the ever-present Live Golf League throughout. And it doesn't need I'm not asking for big takeout sections on Live. I'm asking for just acknowledgement of Live in these episodes with players who are intertwined in the Live PGA Tour discussion.
Everyone's season. Every single person's season was impacted by that, and it was on their mind. And it, right? It's not just Rory. It's not just DJ. Every single person can speak to it. Go ahead, Lou.
Why I'm so disappointed is I think if you are a newcomer to golf, and this is the series that is kind of your introduction to golf, you did not experience what golf fans experienced in 2022 at all. Every time somebody took the mic, it was just a matter of time before they got asked about Live, and that's not evident in this docu-series at
I think
all.
there could have
So
been
that's just really
I think
disappointing.
there could have been
to
a
me.
lot about the
Where-
beefs, like the shit talking, the crossfire back and forth. That was a
Right.
major part of golf in 2022 was in a way that we never see with this sport is guys
Lawsuits. The lawsuits not
like
mentioned.
going at each other. Yeah.
Well, where it also fails on another level is when you're talking about season 2. And like you're starting to go at this point they're starting to film for season 2. And one of the things by not creating the story, by not introducing and really growing the story here, if Liv just like crumbles and DJ is trying to crawl back or pull like these guys are trying to come, how do you tell that story when you've missed the boat on telling the initial
I
story?
have a feeling
right?
they'll find
this
a way.
isn't a story
to tell
that
one.
died.
I have a feeling they'll find a way to tell that one, the collapse of Liv.
Exactly.
And come back.
Or like if 5 more players go to Live this year, like you've missed laying the groundwork, and it doesn't. And again, I think like the thing that bothers me is that the Tiger story has has worked super well because it never has overwhelmed an episode, but it's been a part of every episode. And that could have been the same thing with Liv here.
Okay.
And how about the fact that the next episode covers the tour championship? By that time, lawsuits are flying.
You had the stay at Memphis, right? The TRO at Memphis, right?
How is so Live Golf and PGA Tour are litigating against each other, and that is never mentioned
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
docuseries.
It's a good point.
That's an incredible miss.
All right, we may talk about this more in episode 8 recap as well, I would imagine, because it is a big, I mean, it's the tour championship and there's some Rory footage, obviously Rory's voice in the whole year. Other things you kind of thought fell flat or did not like about this episode? I thought, I watched this late last night. I thought I was like hallucinating when the teaser, like the first whatever they do at every episode, first 3 minutes, like to get you in, was like about Sahith being some guy who picked up a club for the first time yesterday, and Mito is like, I don't know, the biggest hype prospect since Tiger, and like they finally do eventually say, oh, by the way, he's 27. Like, I thought that was bizarre. Like, I thought the rookies angle, I know you said it was like you liked that. I thought it was a little overplayed. Like, do they actually root for each other in the way it's like, hey, Mito, talk about Sahith. Sahith, hey, talk about Mito. Like, were you really rooting for him at Southern Hills? Like, I thought they sort of like forced that upon them. But the way they portrayed these two guys as like opposite, like a second round pick and the number 1 overall pick coming in the NFL was a little bizarre to me because it's not chopped liver.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to run down some like career credentials,
Sure.
I mean, Sahith Theegala was a Haskins Award winner. Right. I believe he ranked number 1 in the world amateur golf rankings. So okay, that's one player who's portrayed
what's a Haskins Award, Andy?
Great, thank you for that's the most outstanding collegiate golfer for the year. So the best,
also probably would have had more collegiate awards if not for the pandemic. Could have. I mean, I can't prove a false thing, but yeah.
Number 1 player on a I think it was pretty historically great college team that their run was cut short because of the pandemic. So that's Theegala, who's portrayed as like kind of like a no name coming up through the Korn Ferry ranks. Mito Pereira is 27. He won 3 times, which I think they
Battlefield.
They got the Battlefield. Yeah. It doesn't happen all the time, but if you also look at the guys that have done the Battlefield, it's not like the most outstanding list. Okay, he's 27. He took 3 years off golf, and he's from a country that is not a golf powerhouse, and he's being portrayed as like the next big thing on the PGA Tour. It's crazy. That would be like me comparing in the NBA, let's see, like Alex Caruso to Zion Williamson.
Right. I don't know if they took the bit about Sahith living with his parents to mean like he has nowhere to go. He's living in his mom's basement, just looking for a break and trying to figure out the game. Like, I don't know if they over interpreted that, but it was weird.
One of the things too, like Sahith Theegala probably, because of his credentials, signed like a mid 6 figures endorsement deal the second he turned professional. I don't think the same thing existed for Mito Pereira. I might be wrong, but I don't think any equipment company was like hammering down the Mito Pereira door at age 23 like they were for Sahith Theegala. This is just like an extraordinarily flawed storyline that feels like this storyline was created because of Mito's success in the PGA Championship.
Yep.
I gotta say, like, I've been too negative, but whatever. We're giving our full swing thoughts here. It's crazy that they give an anecdote that Mito quit golf for a couple years and then just pass right by on that and never explain what happened there. I'm like dying to. I actually didn't know that he quit golf for a couple years in his teens. They just mentioned he quit for a couple years. How is he not asked about that and we don't get any backstory?
Especially within
there?
The context
that is a big
of Joaquin being there, and that's like when Joaquin jumped him, right? That's how like Joaquin got on tour because this gap that Mito just decided to quit. for a few.
How do you brush over that to show a bunch
It
of
had to
footage
be
from the
something. What happened?
Right. What happened?
I thought, did you feel like it got enough of sort of like the Latin, their background, how they came up? They talk about always practicing
No.
together. I love the moment when they're talking about the piscola. That was cool. And Joaquin talks about, like, we start drinking when we're 18 in Chile. But Mito probably when he was 13. I was like, why? I would love to know more about, like, what that whole scene was like in the junior golf, and when they were drinking. Why did Mito start when he was 13? Obviously, smaller scale question about why did he quit. So I think there could have been even more on sort of the Latin group cohort.
It was one note I had that might be asking too much, but like, could we have gone to Chile to film a little bit of this? Like, that would have been sweet. Maybe just out of the budget, but like, damn, that would have been really, really cool to see where these guys grew up and practiced together. But again, that might be nitpicking because I understand it's hard to get a lot of these guys time and fly to Chile, but that would have been pretty sweet.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Should we do notes? Quick cleanup. I don't have a ton. I thought it was amusing. Why are Mito and Joaquin in their playing outfits, like in full blown branded? I thought that was his house in Jupiter, and I don't think that it was the Honda. But they're literally in like all their brand. Or did they put that on because Netflix was filming, or maybe it was on the road and I missed the label jump. So that was a quick note. Go ahead, Andy. What are you gonna say?
One thing was interesting. I found was like how like Mito has a chef and like this performance coach, and then Sahith was just like it was just his parents. I thought that was super interesting. I don't know what the barrier is for chef. Like I wouldn't have expected a rookie on the PGA Tour in Mito's standing to have a personal chef, but he did. It was that I found like he kind of has this like whole team, and I liked Sahith how he had, and maybe this was a lot of portrayal, them trying to portray that storyline that I just went off on about him doing his like. To me, I got the sense that Mito does none of his own laundry. Mito doesn't even cook his food. And then you had Sahith kind of just like living on his own. I love that Sahith is in Houston. That was something that I really liked. And I don't know. I did like the quote, "Once everything gets to golf, it will be okay," from Sahith. And that, I think it really encapsulates the struggle of rookies, is like there's a lot of stuff going on. And I think this is like they did a nice job, but this was me picking it up as that's the struggle. Like the really hard thing about being a professional golfer for a guy like Sahith is that like you go from these environments of college golf where everything is taken care of for you. Like you live with and then after living with his parents, everything's taken care of, to like you have to take care of almost everything yourself. And but at the end of the day, the golf is what you've done your whole life.
I thought they made him like he was like, honestly, getting back to the portrayal of him being just a low level rookie. Like he was one of the legit like breakout players. I don't want to say star, but like of last year, he was like a darling. He popped from Phoenix in February all the way through June into July in the Open. Like he was a breakout, like a really compelling figure game wise, on the course, off the course with the scene in Phoenix. I thought they kind of like minimized obviously his credentials, but like I thought they made him a little boring. Like ask him just talk about like Mito and talk about his station as a rookie. I felt like some of his quotes did not do justice to the sort of character and figure he was on tour.
Can we talk about something?
Yeah, always. It's our podcast.
He made it to Eastlake.
Right. It's a good point.
Again, like I don't want to be negative, but this episode where it is in this season, if this was episode 2, I wouldn't have this complaint. This is episode 7. There has been some sort of a chronological flow to this episode. You are going to Eastlake next episode for Rory. And I don't want to, I don't think this is a spoiler since this happened. Rory wins the FedEx Cup. Okay? Now, wouldn't it be a great way to tease what the FedEx Cup is and talk about like how great of a season a rookie has to have in order to get to the to the FedEx Cup Finals? I mean,
It's a great point.
am I taking crazy pills here? Like
That should have been a big
like the
part
pork
of it for this story.
like that. Well, it doesn't. It makes me believe that this episode was slated to be episode 1, 2, or 3.
Or done and dusted and produced in whatever, July, June, August or something. We're like, we got our episode for this, and they didn't add to it. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
So, like, if it's going to be episode 2, and we get like the Brooks Scotty early episode that like, and then this is episode 2, it all of a sudden makes sense. But with it being episode 7, you don't have anything on Scythe after that waste management, really. And it's like, oh, like there are like 1 or 2 rookies every year that make it to the FedEx Cup Finals. And he's one of them. And there's nothing about that. How great of a year he had. You just are like, this is more about the casual fan. I know this about Scythe. I know this. But this show is about appealing. Like, one of the reasons that they did this show was to cast a bigger net in golf. Scythe is an extraordinarily interesting character. Like, I think we all agree, like, we love the Scythe parts of the show, and then you just don't follow through with like the most interesting part of the Scythe story, which he was great. He's like everybody expects him to maybe be like a dark horse candidate for Ryder Cup candidacy this year.
I think maybe the big flaw of the show, as you were saying that, Andy, that I'm now realizing is like they maybe just needed to zoom out a little bit, right? Like, okay, we covered Sahith. What are the most interesting things about Sahith this year? And like kind of go about building the storyline that way. Because to me, Sahith's like his story was he had a really successful rookie year where he made it to Eastlake, and that's really hard to do as a rookie. Like, as you're saying, as what you just said, Andy, like that should be the story. And that's completely absent from this episode. So I understand what they were trying to do and tie these guys together and kind of build these very particular narratives. But I think they needed to zoom out a little bit and be like, in 2022, what was the story of golf? I mean, they missed Live, they missed a lot.
The other thing that Sahith fits into when you want to talk about big storylines in golf is the youth movement, and like how these guys rookies are coming in fully equipped to handle golf and play high level golf. And Sahith's a perfect example of that.
Rory gets into that a little bit in the next episode about being like the oldest guy all of a sudden at the Tour Championship.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right. That was another miss. What do you grade this? Do we want to do the grade, or is it just generally pass, fail, thumbs up?
I think it's just another C for me.
Okay. Joseph?
There's some, I picked up insights. I enjoyed some things about this. But when we're looking at the episode as a whole in the overall scope of the show, it to me feels like the show is losing momentum as it reaches its finale, and that's not a good thing.
Okay. Joseph?
It's a D for me because I actually am pissed that Liv was not covered more thoroughly. I feel betrayed as somebody who follows golf that we missed like the biggest storyline. So it can't be higher than a D for me. I loved some of the Sahith anecdotes, but
same.
Truly, like, it's a black eye on the show that we didn't have more Liv when Mito Pereira signs with Liv 12 months later. Like, I actually can't get over that.
I think I'm like C-, D+ kind of thing, just because like if you have a part of the show where it feels like I'm hallucinating, like this is false news, this isn't the reality, and I'm not even getting to the Liv part. I'm getting to like the portrayal of Sahith like as a guy just off the driving range somewhere. I thought was like just not accurate enough, right? So that bothered me. And as Andy just alluded to, like they kind of missed really the success of his season in this portrayal. But I love the 72nd hole stuff and obviously some of the Sahith background and home video stuff too. So
also, now that I'm just thinking of it real quick, Cam Young had like an amazing year, and that might have been a good thing to throw in there on a rookies episode. Like maybe just mention
Rookie of the
it.
Year.
I know he wasn't profiled.
Rookie of the Year. Didn't he agree?
He was in contention in multiple majors. Like how about just talking about him a little bit? You don't have to have him interviewed. I understand he wasn't part of the show, but we had a historic rookie season from Cam Young. No mention.
Good point. All right, that does it for episode 7. We'll be back to wrap it up with a review and recap of episode 8 on Rory McIlroy, the Open and the Tour Championship.